Meetings, incentive travel, conferences or other conventions and exhibitions which have varied meanings and interpretations. MICE tourism is what we have known all along as conference tourism. It is also known as business events tourism or business travel in different regions of the world. It is about traveling to a destination for the purpose of meetings, incentive travel, conventions and exhibitions. For example, when Kenya football fans went to Kampala for the match between Kenya and Uganda. Now, to tell us more about MICE is Les Bailey, the chairman of MICE Committee and the Secretariat. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Now, let's begin with conference tourism, because most of the time people tend to think it's just about business meetings. Is it just about that?
Well, I said primarily it can be about that, but the big thing about business tourism is that when somebody, for example, comes to Nairobi for an exhibition or a meeting, quite often they would stay on after that exhibition as well. And Kenya has some fantastic things to offer. And so it's very, very important for tourism generally, but also it has the big knock-on effect because it involves the airlines. Those people have got to come here, they've got to typically fly here. They'll be staying somewhere, so that has a big knock-on effect into the tourism, into the hotel industry. They'll eat, they'll drink, they'll make phone calls. So it's very, very important for the economy generally. And it's also an area that Kenya up until recently hasn't really been too focused on. It's been very important for Kenya. For example, Kenya is the third largest MICE destination in Africa. And in fact, Nairobi is the second largest convention centre in Africa behind Cape Town. So for tourism, for the economy, for those people involved in tourism, it's a very important part of tourism these days.
Okay. And
quite often if a businessman comes here, then his wife says, hey, you're going to Kenya, I've seen the wildlife, I'm coming with you. And so quite often she'll also come and spend a few days here. So it isn't just about that individual attending the meeting, it's also the add-on things that come through those people coming here.
Okay, great. Now, having the privilege to host this show every weekday at KICC, we get to see a lot of conferences and exhibitions here. There's always something up and about and happening. So we might assume that it's doing well, but that's not the case. What do we need to work on to reach the potential that Kenya has?
Okay, first of all, I think it is doing well. As you say, invariably there's some meeting or convention here. But MICE isn't just about the KICC. If you actually look around the country, we actually have a huge number of venues that can cater for MICE. And one of the things that we found when we first started off as a national committee is that we tried to do an audit of how many venues there were. And quite simply, we don't really know. Whilst we have KICC, which is the biggest one in Nairobi, the UN has a very large conference centre. Then we have other hotels in Nairobi and certainly on the coast have their own convention centres as well. And a convention isn't just about getting 5,000 people there. It could be 20 or 30 people coming in. And so therefore you could actually find that MICE meetings actually happen down in the Masai Mara, particularly around incentives, because it's an incentive, say, typically for Salesforce. Now, they probably don't want to come to the KICC for a few days, but they'd love to go down to one of the lodges in the Mara. So it is an area that we have some challenges in. First of all, we are competing against the likes of Geneva, the likes of Cape Town, Cairo. So very large cities that put an awful lot of time and money into this kind of tourism. So they're our competitors. So we really have to make sure that we are world class. So we not only have to ensure that our venues are top class, but also the service behind those. If somebody's coming to a convention and it's, say, held at the KICC, but there's nowhere for them to stay in Nairobi, because of the number of hotels that we have, and we do need more hotels. That again is a disadvantage, can be a disadvantage for us. So as a MICE committee, we're really trying to look at the problem holistically. It's about raising standards. It's about making sure that our hotels, our 5-star hotels, offer the same level of services as a Dubai 5-star hotel. Also, we need to make sure that there are good standards within the actual convention centres, so that, you know, when people finish in, whether it's in Nairobi or down at Mombasa or even the Masai Mara, they go back to the organisers and say, what a wonderful place it was. The convention centre was wonderful, the hospitality was great, you know, we flew into the airport and it was all very efficient. So there's a lot of things involved in this. As a committee, we really believe that we're only touching the tip of the iceberg here.
Okay, you have mentioned that good customer service, of course, brings in a lot of people. Do our hotels also need to work on or put more investment into the conference centres?
I think, you know, with some of the hotels that already have conference centres, but, you know, they've put a lot of investment into that. But what they've done, they've concentrated on their convention centre or their conference centre and their hotel, and so therefore sometimes the size of the conference centre is dependent upon the number of rooms they have in the hotel. What we are trying to do is to ensure that the hotels and the lodges really see that they are part of a much bigger picture. We will, as a committee, try to encourage more hotels to increase their conference facilities, because Kenya still is pretty much lagging behind in the quantity and also the quality of conference centres. For example, Kenya really needs a good conference centre down in Mombasa as well, because there's a lot of hotels down the north coast and south coast. And then you also have the beaches as well. So that again is one of the things that we're looking at, and certainly with, you know, Vision 2030, which covers specifically conference tourism. So there's a lot that Kenya can do, but of course in all these things one of the big drawbacks is the finance. And that is probably our single biggest challenge that we have.
Okay, great. And what are you doing about it?
Okay, what we're doing, we're actually at the moment in discussion, detailed discussion with both the Minister and the PS in tourism. We are very closely involved with the Kenya Tourist Board, the Kenya Association of Travel Agents, the Kenya Hotel and Catering. So all of the tourism bodies have all got to be part of this as well. And we're getting tremendous support from them. For example, earlier in the year when we were looking at our strategic plan, we had a workshop here at the KICC, and we had members from 70 organisations. And that was from a very small company that may have a few vehicles which it hires out, right up to some of the big hotels, Kenya Tourist Board, Kenya Association of Travel Agents. So the funding, it will end up being a public-private partnership as well. We'll also be looking for funding overseas. There's quite a few donors that provide funding for this specific purpose, particularly if we can demonstrate that it really does have a major benefit for the economy and for Kenya generally as well.
Alright. Has the Al-Shabaab insecurity in the country affected the conference tourism in any way?
No, I don't. That at the moment wouldn't have an effect, because conference tourism tends to be looked at very much in advance. For example, I was speaking with somebody in the Secretariat this morning, and they're looking at a bid for a conference in 2015, so 4 years away. So at the moment, the people who are organising that conference, I don't think the Al-Shabaab issue would make any difference to them, because Kenya is still seen as a very safe place, and I think we saw a report this morning that the US travel agents have actually said that they consider Kenya is very safe. So I think there's other things which are far more positive about Kenya as a MICE destination or a business tourism destination than perhaps some of the issues that we're having at the moment.
Okay, as MICE, what are some of the objectives that you have set out, perhaps in achieving Vision 2030 goals in terms of conference tourism?
Okay, I mean, clearly Vision 2030 is one of our guiding principles, because there's one specific section in there about tourism. Particularly that talks about establishing new tourist centres and conference centres in, for example, Isiolo and in Kalifi down on the coast. So we have to make sure that everything that we do is in line with Vision 2030. We are looking at the legal and the regulatory background around business tourism, because really, although we have the Tourism Act is now in place, there are certain other areas that we have to look at. For example, the National MICE Committee probably isn't necessarily the right body to be looking at all of the issues around this. We're looking at having a National Convention Bureau, which would be a national body which would incorporate government, the tour industry and also private industry. So that's something we really need to look at there. We're also looking at information regarding this kind of tourism. For example, at the moment, we do not know how many tourists come in to Kenya specifically for business tourism, because there are no statistics. So, for example, we're working with the Department of Immigration on that, such that when tourists or when visitors arrive, that we can capture that information at that point. I've already mentioned that we don't really know how many conference and meeting centres we have around the country. So again, we're really pulling that in. We need to ensure that there is very, very good and specific training for the players within this industry. When you organise a conference, it's very different from having 20 tourists come in who want to stay one night in Nairobi, go down to the Masai Mara and then go down to the coast. Because if you've got a conference of 300 or 400 people, first of all, you've got to ensure that they can get here. And whilst we have 30 international airlines flying into Kenya, there's very much a logistic problem around that. So therefore we need to involve the tour operators to ensure that they can start to cope with additional business tourists coming into Kenya. The last thing that we want to do is to increase the number of business tourists coming here without strengthening the services that we can offer for them. So that is a key part, which is why we're working with the other the various bodies within the tourism industry. We also want to promote the additional conference centres and the upgrade of existing ones, so that again we can make sure that we can offer whether it's a conference for 5 people in Nyeri or 3,000 in Nairobi at the KICC, we need to be able to do that. We also need to ensure that all of the players are really working together. This really is we're putting this across as a national programme. And MICE isn't just about the KICC. KICC happens to be one of the players within this. So we need to ensure that, for example, it includes the Serena, it includes the hotels down on the coast, it includes the lodges in the Mara, it includes the people who actually get the tourists here, and the ones who put them into a coach when they get to Jomo Kenyatta and ensure they get to their hotel and ensure then they get to the conference. So it's a much more holistic thing that we're looking at. So the biggest problem is going to be the finance. We've estimated that to do it really properly to a world-class standard is about over 600 million shillings a year, which is a huge amount of money. And on the budget that we have developed, about 100 million of that, we believe, needs to go into the training, because that's the area of the real customer service. So we're competing in a global marketplace here. All
right, and maybe finally, are you optimistic that we are going to achieve this?
Oh yes, I mean, I think tourism generally is doing very well in Kenya at the moment, despite some of the problems or perceived problems. So I think if we can get all of the players working together, and we've already seen from the various meetings that we've had with them, they are all very, very keen to work together on this. And they see that they can't just leave it to a committee of 12 people to do everything for them. We can only provide the framework for it, but at the end of the day, it's up to them. But we believe, yes, we can bring Kenya from being third in Africa, certainly to second in Africa, and we can bring Nairobi from its current 76th place in the world. We can take Nairobi into the top 50 in the world.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that insight.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Well, we have been speaking to Les Bailey, the chairman of MICE Committee and Secretariat, about ways and means of how we can boost the country's scopes in terms of conference tourism. Let's now take a look at what we have for you on Business News.